The rain did not just fall, it punished. It hammered against the black umbrellas like 1,000 tiny fists demanding to be let in. I stood by the open grave, my boots sinking into the mud. I felt cold. Not the kind of cold that a coat can fix. This was a cold that started in the marrow of my bones and radiated outward, freezing my blood, stopping my breath. Lucas was gone. The priest was speaking, but his words were just noise. They were competing with the wind. I stared at the mahogany casket. It looked too small. How could a man as large as life, as vibrant as Lucas, fit inside that wooden box? It seemed like a terrible mistake, a clerical error. Any moment now he would step out from behind a tree, laughing, shaking the rain from his hair, and tell me this was all just a bad joke. But the box stayed shut. The mud kept rising. "This is absolutely ridiculous," a voice hissed behind me. "My Italian leather heels are ruined." That was Beatrice, my mother-in-law. I did not turn around. I didn't have the energy to look at her. I knew exactly what she looked like. She would be wearing black, but not the black of mourning. It was the black of a fashion statement, a designer dress perfectly tailored with a hat that cost more than my first car. "Quiet, Beatrice," a male voice grunted. "People are watching." Richard, my father-in-law. He wasn't worried about Lucas. He was worried about people. He was worried about the optics, the shareholders, the business rivals who had come to pay their respects, or perhaps to make sure the competition was truly dead. And then a third voice, younger, rougher. "Can we speed this up? I need a smoke." Gavin, Lucas's younger brother. They were the three ravens perched on my shoulder. They were his family by blood, but they felt like strangers to his soul. Lucas used to tell me that family isn't about whose DNA you share. It is about whose hand you hold when the world falls apart. Right now, my hands were empty. I clenched them into fists in my pockets. The priest finally finished. He gestured for me to throw the first handful of dirt. I stepped forward. My hand trembled as I picked up the wet soil. It felt heavy, final. I let it drop onto the wood. The sound, a hollow, dull thud, was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of a door slamming shut forever. "Goodbye, my love," I whispered. "Wait for me." I stepped back, making space for his parents. Beatrice threw a flower with a theatrical sigh, wiping a dry eye with a lace handkerchief. Richard nodded stiffly at the grave, as if closing a business deal. Gavin didn't even step up. He just kicked a stone into the hole and turned away, pulling a pack of cigarettes from his jacket. The ceremony was over. The guests began to disperse, running for their cars to escape the downpour. I wanted to stay. I wanted to stand there until the rain washed me away too. But a hand gripped my arm. It wasn't a comforting grip. It was firm, steering, possessive. "Come on, Elena," Richard said. "The car is waiting. We have matters to discuss." I want to be alone for a moment," I stammered, my voice sounding rusty. "Don't be dramatic," Beatrice snapped, appearing on my other side. "You're soaking wet. You'll catch pneumonia, and we don't have time for hospitals. We are going back to the house." The house. Lucas's sanctuary. Our home. "I can drive myself," I said weakly. "Nonsense," Richard stated. "We sold your car yesterday. Or rather, we arranged for it to be picked up. It wasn't Lucas's name after all. Part of the estate management." My head snapped up. "You what?" "Get in the car, Elena," Gavin called from the back seat of the waiting limousine. "I'm freezing my ass off here." I looked at Richard, His face was a stone wall. There was no negotiation. I was too exhausted to fight. I was too broken to argue about a car when my husband was being buried 6 feet under. I let them lead me to the limousine. I slid onto the leather seat, sandwiched between Beatrice and the window. The door closed, shutting out the sound of the rain, sealing me in a silent, air-conditioned tomb with the people who terrified me the most. The drive to the estate was agonizing. The silence in the car was thick, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with calculation. I leaned my head against the cold glass, watching the grey world blur by. Every mile we drove took me further away from him. The service was adequate, Beatrice said, breaking the silence. She pulled a compact mirror from her purse and checked her lipstick. Though the flowers were a bit wilting, I told the florist to use lilies, not roses. Lucas hated roses. Lucas loved roses, I said softly. He planted them in our garden every spring. Beatrice snapped the mirror shut. You really didn't know him that well, did you, dear? Just because you were married for 3 years doesn't mean you knew his history. I raised him. I bit my lip. I tasted blood. Lucas hadn't spoken to his mother for 2 years before he got sick. She hadn't visited him once during the chemotherapy. Not once. But now, she was the expert on his life. Richard, Beatrice turned to her husband. Did you call the realtor? My heart skipped a beat. Realtor? Why? Richard didn't look at me. He was typing on his phone. Just checking valuations, Elena. Standard procedure. Lucas left behind a significant portfolio. It needs to be managed by professionals. But the house is not for sale, I said, panic rising in my chest. It's my home. It's a 12-bedroom estate, Elena. Gavin chuckled from the front seat. A bit much for a struggling artist, don't you think? Who's going to pay the heating bill? You? With your drawings of bunnies and bears? Those illustrations pay my bills, I said, my voice trembling. Peanuts, Gavin scoffed. Lucas paid the bills. Let's be real. I looked out the window again. Tears were stinging my eyes, hot and angry. They weren't just grieving anymore. They were calculating. They were already dividing the spoils before the body was even cold. Lucas had warned me, they will come for everything, El. He had told me one night in the hospital, his hand frail in mine. They are like sharks. They smell blood. You have to be strong. I didn't feel strong. I felt like a small boat in the middle of a hurricane. The limousine turned through the iron gates of our estate. The Skyline Villa. Lucas had built it on a hill overlooking the city. He wanted a place where he could see the horizon, where he could feel free. As the car pulled up to the grand entrance, I saw something that made my stomach turn. There was a moving truck parked in the driveway. A large black van. Who is that? I asked. The catering staff, Beatrice said smoothly. And some assistants. We're staying, Elena. I froze. Staying? For how long? Richard pocketed his phone and looked at me for the first time. His eyes were cold, like polished steel. Until the estate is settled. We are the immediate family. We have a duty to secure Lucas's assets, and frankly, you are in no state to handle this alone. We are doing you a favor. A favor. They were moving in. The house felt different the moment we walked inside. Usually our home smelled of vanilla and old paper, the scent of my studio and Lucas's library. But today it smelled of wet wool and strangers. The assistants Beatrice mentioned were already there. They were moving things. I saw a man carrying a stack of Lucas's books. "Stop!" I cried out, rushing forward. "What are you doing with those?" The man looked confused. He looked at Beatrice. Put them in the storage boxes, Beatrice commanded, walking past me as if I were a ghost. We need to clear out the library. Richard needs a workspace. He can't work surrounded by dusty novels. That is Lucas's office, I protested, standing in front of the library doors. You can't just take it. Elena, Richard said, his voice booming in the high-ceilinged hallway. He took off his wet coat and handed it to a servant I didn't recognize. Do not be hysterical. We are not throwing them away. We are archiving them. This house is now a base of operations for the transition. We need space. Transition to what? I asked, shaking. To the new ownership, Gavin grinned, walking in with a muddy duffel bag. He dropped it right onto the white Persian rug. By the way, which room is mine? I bagsy the one with the balcony. The master suite looks nice, but I guess that's taken. He looked at me with a smirk. Unless you want a roommate. I felt sick, physically sick. The guest wing is on the east side, I whispered. Please, just leave the library alone for today. Please. Beatrice sighed, as if dealing with a toddler. Fine, for today. But Elena, you really need to understand your position here. You are a guest in this family's grief. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. A guest. I was his wife. I was the one who held the bucket when he was sick. I was the one who shaved his head when his hair fell out. I was the one he kissed with his last breath. But to them, I was just an obstacle, a squatter. I'm going to my room, I said, my voice barely audible. Good idea, Beatrice said. Freshen up. Mr. Sterling is coming at 6 p.m. to read the will. We want to get this over with. I turned and ran up the stairs. I didn't stop until I reached our bedroom, my bedroom now. I slammed the door and locked it. I leaned my back against the wood, sliding down until I hit the floor. I hugged my knees and finally, I let the scream out. It was a silent scream, buried in my knees, shaking my entire body. The room was exactly as he had left it. His cologne was still on the dresser. His watch was on the nightstand, stopped at 4 a.m., the time he died. I crawled over to the nightstand and picked up the watch. I held it to my ear, listening to the silence. Help me, Lucas, I prayed. I don't know how to fight them. I stayed there for hours, watching the rain streak against the panoramic windows. I watched the grey light fade into darkness. At 5:55 p.m., there was a sharp knock on the door. Elena, Beatrice's voice came through the wood. Mr. Sterling is here. Don't keep us waiting. It's rude. I stood up. I walked to the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes red and swollen. I looked like a ghost. No, I told my reflection. I am not a ghost. I am Elena. I am his wife. I splashed cold water on my face. I brushed my hair. I put on the necklace Lucas gave me for our first anniversary. A simple silver locket. Inside was a picture of us laughing on a beach. I opened the door and walked down the stairs. The living room had been rearranged. My comfortable armchairs were pushed to the side. In the center, they had placed the long dining table chairs arranged in a semicircle facing the fireplace. It looked like a courtroom. Mr. Sterling stood by the fireplace. He was a tall man, thin as a rail, with silver hair and spectacles that magnified his sharp, intelligent eyes. He held a leather briefcase as if it contained nuclear codes. Richard and Beatrice were sitting in the center, holding glasses of wine. Gavin was slouching in a chair to the left, playing a game on his phone. There was one empty chair. It was placed slightly apart from the others, to the side. I sat down in it. Good evening, Mr. Sterling said. His voice was dry and precise, like tearing paper. I offer my deepest condolences for your loss. Lucas was a remarkable man. Yes, yes. Richard waved his hand impatiently. We all miss him. Let's proceed to the business at hand, Sterling. We have a lot of paperwork to sort out. Mr. Sterling looked at Richard over the rim of his glasses. He didn't blink. Very well. He placed the briefcase on the coffee table and clicked the latches open. The sound echoed in the silent room. He pulled out a thick document bound in blue velvet. This is the last will and testament of Lucas Alexander Thorne, Sterling announced. Gavin stopped playing his game. Beatrice sat up straighter. Richard leaned forward. The air in the room suddenly felt electric. The greed was palpable. It radiated off them like heat waves. Lucas was very specific, Sterling continued. My heart sank. Had he? Had he really left me with nothing? After everything we promised each other? I didn't care about the money, but the house, the memories. If they kicked me out, I would lose the only pieces of him I had left. Please let me finish, Sterling said, his voice cutting through Beatrice's celebration. The term true family is defined in a separate clause, Sterling said. However, there is a condition precedent, a holding period. A what? Richard frowned. The estate is currently frozen, Sterling stated calmly, for a period of 45 days. 45 days? Gavin shouted. Are you kidding me? We have expenses. 45 days, Sterling repeated. During this time, all potential beneficiaries must reside within the primary residence, this villa. You must live together. You must mourn together. Lucas wanted his family to be united in his memory. Well, that's easy, Beatrice laughed, relaxing. We are already here. We are already united. Furthermore, Sterling continued, the final execution of the will and the transfer of funds is contingent upon the adherence to the Code of Familial Conduct. He held up a sealed white envelope. It was thick. It had a red wax seal on the back. What is that? Richard asked suspiciously. These are Lucas's instructions, Sterling said. They are private. I am the only one who knows the contents of this envelope, aside from the deceased. At the end of the 45 days, I will open this envelope. If the conduct of the family members aligns with Lucas's definition of true family, the assets will be released. And if not? I asked, finding my voice. Sterling looked at me. Then the disposition of the assets will change dramatically. Richard scoffed. This is absurd. Lucas always had a flair for the dramatic. Code of conduct? We are his parents. We raised him to be a decent man. Obviously, we meet the criteria. Yeah, Gavin added. We're family. We're the definition of family. They looked at each other and smiled. They saw the word family and stopped listening. They assumed the test was simply being related to him. They thought the 45 days were just a formality. They didn't hear the danger in Sterling's voice. So, Sterling said, closing the folder. The clock starts now. Day 1 of 45. I will return at noon on the 45th day. He handed a set of keys to Richard. These are the keys to the master safe. However, the safe is on a time lock. It will not open until I return. Fine. Richard took the keys, his eyes gleaming. 45 days. We can do that standing on our heads. Sterling packed up his briefcase. He walked over to me. He extended his hand. Mrs. Thorne, he said softly. Are you all right? I don't know, I whispered. He leaned in closer, his voice barely a breath. Lucas loved you very much, Elena. Never forget that. Trust the process. He straightened up and nodded to the room. Good evening. He walked out into the rain. As soon as the front door closed, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Well, Beatrice stood up, clapping her hands. That went better than expected. 50 million! We have to wait a month and a half, Gavin complained. It's a blink of an eye, Richard said, pouring himself another glass of wine. He looked at me. Elena, since we are all going to be living here, we need to set some ground rules. Rules? I asked. Yes, Beatrice chimed in. We can't have this place looking like a mess. And since we are letting you stay here during the probation period, even though the will clearly favors the blood family, we expect you to earn your keep. Earn my keep, I repeated, disbelief washing over me. The maid service is expensive, Richard said. We should cut costs until the money is released. You're young, you're healthy. You can handle the cooking and cleaning. It's the least you can do for the family that is graciously hosting you. Hosting me in my own house. And Elena, Gavin added, kicking his feet up onto the coffee table. Make me a sandwich. I'm starving. They stared at me, waiting, expecting me to bow, expecting me to serve. I looked at the sealed envelope that Sterling had left on the mantelpiece. The code of familial conduct. They thought they had already won. They thought I was the loser. I stood up slowly. My legs were shaking, but I forced my spine to be straight. The kitchen is down the hall, I said quietly. If you're hungry, you know where it is. Silence filled the room. Gavin's jaw dropped. Beatrice's eyes narrowed into slits. Excuse me? Beatrice whispered. I'm going to bed, I said. Good night. I turned and walked away. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I could hear Richard's low growl of anger, but I didn't stop. I walked up the stairs, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had fired the first shot. The war had begun. The house began to change the very next morning. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, creeping rot. It started with the sounds. I woke up not to the soft chirping of the birds in the garden, but to the aggressive clatter of pots and pans. I heard heavy footsteps thudding on the hardwood floors. Steps that didn't know the rhythm of this house. Lucas used to walk softly, respecting the creaks of the old wood. These new footsteps were arrogant. They stomped. I dragged myself out of bed. The spot beside me was cold and empty. I ran my hand over the sheets, smoothing out a wrinkle that wasn't there. Day 2, I thought. 43 to go. When I walked into the kitchen, the smell hit me. Grease. Heavy, thick bacon grease. Lucas and I had always been healthy eaters, preferring oatmeal and fruit. But the kitchen counter was now covered in white paper bags from a fast food joint. Gavin was sitting at the island, shirtless. He was eating a breakfast sandwich with his mouth open. Crumbs were falling onto the pristine marble counter. The counter Lucas had picked out himself, because he loved the way the veins looked like lightning. Morning sunshine, Gavin grunted, not looking up from his phone. Coffee's out. You should make more. I stared at the crumbs. Good morning, Gavin. Could you please use a plate? He stopped chewing. He looked at the counter, then at me. He deliberately brushed the crumbs onto the floor with the back of his hand. Oops, he smirked. Guess the maid will get it. Oh wait, that's you, isn't it? I gripped the fabric of my robe. My nails dug into my palms. I am not the maid, Gavin. I am your sister-in-law. Not by blood, he reminded me, taking a loud slurp of his juice. Sterling was pretty clear about that. True family, remember? We are the VIPs here. You're just the +1 that overstayed her welcome. I turned away before he could see the tears pricking my eyes. I filled the kettle. The noise of the water rushing into the metal pot was the only thing that drowned out his chewing. By the afternoon, the invasion had moved from the kitchen to the living room. I came downstairs to find Beatrice directing two men in blue coveralls. They were carrying the large velvet sofa, Lucas's favorite reading spot, toward the garage. "Stop!" I shouted, running down the last few steps. "What are you doing?" Beatrice turned. She was holding a swatch of fabric in a hideous shade of gold. "Oh, Elena, there you are. This grey sofa is simply depressing. It absorbs all the light. I'm having it moved to storage." "That isn't just a sofa," I said, my voice rising. "Lucas spent hours there. He designed the living room around that piece." "And look where that got him," Beatrice said coldly. "Dead at 32. Maybe if he had surrounded himself with brighter colors, he wouldn't have been so morbid." The cruelty of her words took the air out of my lungs. She was blaming his cancer on his furniture? On his taste? "You can't move it," I stated, stepping in front of the movers. "The will says you have to live in the residence. It doesn't say you can remodel it." Beatrice walked up to me. She was shorter than I was, but she loomed like a giant. She smelled of expensive perfume and decay. "The will," she hissed, "says we must reside here. It implies we must be comfortable. And I cannot be comfortable surrounded by this gloom." "Richard agrees. Move it." She waved her hand at the movers. They hesitated, looking at me. "I said move it," she snapped. The men apologized with their eyes and lifted the sofa. I watched as they carried away the place where Lucas used to hold me while we watched movies. The place where we planned our future. I stood there, helpless, as Beatrice draped the gold fabric over a chair. "Much better," she declared. "We need to liven this place up for the party." I froze. "Party?" "Yes," she said, examining a vase. "Richard is inviting some associates over on Friday. To celebrate the future. We need to network. Lucas let his connections rot. We are going to fix that." "You are throwing a party?" I whispered. "He was buried yesterday." Beatrice turned to me, her face a mask of fake sympathy. "Life goes on, Elena. The world doesn't stop just because one heart does. You would do well to learn that. Now run along. I need to focus." I fled to the only place I had left, my studio. It was a converted sunroom at the back of the house. It was filled with light, the smell of turpentine, and my half-finished canvases. It was the one room Beatrice hadn't touched yet, probably because the smell of paint offended her delicate nose. I locked the door. I needed a barrier, even a flimsy wooden one. I sat on my stool and looked at the easel. It was a portrait of Lucas. I had started it 3 months ago, but I couldn't finish the eyes. I couldn't capture the way they looked when he was in pain, but trying to smile for me. Now, looking at the unfinished painting, I felt a surge of panic. I was forgetting him. His voice was getting drowned out by Gavin's music blasting from the floor above. His scent was being replaced by bacon grease and Beatrice's perfume. I needed to hear him. I remembered the library. Part 1 of the invasion had claimed the library. But I knew Lucas. He always had secrets, little pockets of privacy. I waited until nightfall. The house finally fell silent around 1 a.m. Richard had passed out in the master bedroom, my bedroom, after drinking half a bottle of Lucas's vintage whiskey. Beatrice was asleep in the guest suite. Gavin was out, presumably spending money he didn't have yet. I crept out of the studio. The hallway was dark. Shadows stretched long and thin, like fingers reaching for me. I pushed open the library door. The room had been desecrated. Richard had moved his own heavy oak desk in, pushing Lucas's sleek modern desk into the corner. Files were scattered everywhere. The air smelled of cigar smoke. I tiptoed over to Lucas's desk. It looked small and lonely in the corner. I ran my hand over the smooth wood. "Where is it?" I thought. "I know you left something." Lucas was a man of contingencies. He was a software architect. He built backdoors into everything: his code, his life, his house. I felt under the drawer. Nothing. I checked the back of the frame. Nothing. Then I remembered. The loose floorboard. It wasn't a cliché, it was a joke between us. When we bought the house, we found a loose board under the rug near the window. Lucas had laughed and said, "Every good mystery needs a hollow floorboard." He refused to fix it. I moved the rug. I pried up the edge of the wood with my fingernails. It popped up with a soft groan. In the small, dusty space between the joists, there was a box. A small metal lockbox. My heart hammered against my ribs. I lifted it out. It was heavy. I didn't have a key, but I knew the combination. 04-12. Our anniversary. The lock clicked. The lid sprang open. Inside, there was no money, no secret jewels. There was a USB drive and a vintage voice recorder. The kind Lucas used to brainstorm ideas while pacing the room. I picked up the recorder. My thumb hovered over the play button. I was terrified. What if it was just work notes? What if it was nothing? I pressed the button. Static hissed for a moment, and then, "Hey, El." His voice. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stop the sob that tried to escape. It was him. It sounded like he was sitting right next to me. He sounded tired but warm. "If you are listening to this," the recording continued, "then the circus has come to town. I'm sorry. I wanted to protect you from them, but I knew I couldn't stop them from coming. They are relentless." A pause. I heard him take a sip of water on the tape. "You're probably feeling alone right now. You're probably hiding in the studio or the library. You're probably thinking about giving up, about letting them have the money just to get some peace." Tears streamed down my face, dripping onto my lap. "Yes," I nodded in the dark. "Yes, that is exactly what I'm thinking." "Don't do it, El." Lucas's voice became firm. "This isn't about the money. It never was. It's about the truth. They think they are the true family because they share my last name, but they don't know what that word means. I've set a test, Elena. The will, the 45 days, it's all a test. I know how they will behave. I know they will push you. But you have something they don't." I leaned closer to the recorder, desperate to hear. "You have the eyes to see," he said, "and the heart to endure. Don't fight them with their weapons. Don't shout. Don't scream. Just let them be themselves. Let them show the world who they are. The house is watching, El. Remember that. The house is watching." The recording clicked off. I sat there in the dark, the silence rushing back in. The house is watching. What did that mean? I looked around the library. The shadows seemed less threatening now. They felt protective. I looked at the USB drive. I decided not to check it yet. It was too risky on Richard's computer. I would keep it safe. I put the recorder back in the box, but I kept the box with me. I tucked it under my arm like a shield. I crept back to the hallway, feeling a tiny spark of warmth in my chest. I wasn't alone. Lucas was playing a game with them, a game they didn't even know they had started. As I reached the stairs, the front door slammed open. Gavin stumbled in, drunk. He knocked over an umbrella stand. "Who goes there?" he slurred, squinting into the darkness. "It's me," I said, clutching the box tight against my stomach. "The widow," he laughed, a harsh, barking sound, lurking in the shadows. "You look like a thief, Elena. What do you have there?" "Personal items," I said, stepping back. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm. His breath smelled of stale beer and cigarettes. "Let me see. Is it jewelry?" "Mom said you might try to steal the jewelry." "Let go of me, Gavin!" "Show me!" he shouted, yanking at the box. The metal corner of the box hit his hand. He yelped and let go. "You bitch!" he snarled, clutching his hand. "You hit me!" "I am going to my room," I said, my voice shaking but loud. "Do not touch me again." I ran up the stairs. I heard him kicking the wall below, cursing my name. "You'll pay for that," he screamed up the stairwell. "Wait until Dad hears about this. You're done, Elena. You're done." I slammed my bedroom door and locked it. I pushed a chair under the handle. I sat on the bed, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The spark of warmth from the recording was fighting against the cold fear of Gavin's violence. They were escalating. It was only day 2, and already there was violence. I took the recorder out again. I didn't play it. I just held it. "Let them be themselves," Lucas had said. Gavin had just shown me exactly who he was. I pulled out a notebook from my nightstand. My hands were still trembling, but I forced myself to write. Day 2, Incident 1. Destruction of property, the sofa. Incident 2. Physical intimidation, Gavin. Note. They believe they are the masters. They do not know they are the subjects of an experiment. I closed the notebook. If this was a war, I was no longer an unarmed civilian. I was a witness. And I was going to document every single scar they left on this house. The rain started again outside, tapping against the glass. This time, it didn't sound like punishment. It sounded like applause. End of Act 1, Part 2. The accusation came over breakfast. It was served cold, just like the congealed eggs on Gavin's plate. Richard sat at the head of the table, wearing a crisp suit that cost more than my father made in a year. He didn't look at me. He looked at a spot on the wall just above my head, as if I were a stain he couldn't quite scrub out. "We have a problem, Elena," he said. His voice was calm, which made it terrifying. "Gavin tells me you assaulted him last night." I dropped my fork. It clattered against the china, a sharp sound that made Beatrice wince. "I did not assault him," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "He was drunk. He tried to take something that belonged to Lucas. I pulled away and he hit his hand against the box." "He says you struck him with a metal object," Beatrice added, buttering her toast with surgical precision. "His hand is bruised. He might need an X-ray. Do you know how inconvenient that is? Today is the gala." "It's not a gala," I said. "It's supposed to be a memorial." "It is a celebration of the Thorn legacy," Richard corrected. "And we cannot have the hostess running around attacking the grieving brother. Consider this your first and final warning, Elena. Mr. Sterling said we must live together. He did not say we have to tolerate violence. If you become a danger to this family, I will have you removed, will or no will." I looked at Gavin. He was sitting opposite me, nursing his hand, a smug grin plastered on his face. He winked. They were gaslighting me. They were rewriting reality in real time. "I understand," I said quietly. I looked down at my plate. I needed to pick my battles. Lucas's voice from the recording echoed in my mind. Don't fight them. Let them show who they are. Good. Richard stood up. Now get changed. The caterers are arriving in an hour. Beatrice needs you to supervise the kitchen staff. Since you refuse to hire help, you can fill the gap. The house transformed again. By 6 p.m., the Skyline Villa didn't look like a home. It looked like a hotel lobby. The intimate warmth of Lucas's design was gone, replaced by towering floral arrangements of white lilies, the funeral flower, and ice sculptures that dripped slowly onto the parquet floors. People began to arrive. They weren't Lucas's friends. I didn't see the college roommates who used to play video games on our couch. I didn't see the struggling artists he mentored. I saw suits. I saw investors. I saw the sharks Richard had invited to smell the blood in the water. I stood by the kitchen door, wearing a simple black dress. Beatrice had forbidden me from greeting guests at the front door. It sends the wrong message, she had said. Cartoons. Sweet girl. They were erasing me, just as they were erasing Lucas. I wanted to walk over there and throw the champagne in his face. I wanted to scream that Lucas's sentimental projects were non-profits that helped thousands of children learn to read. But I didn't. I turned and walked back into the kitchen. More crab cakes, Beatrice shouted at me as I passed. She was holding court in the center of the room, wearing a diamond necklace that I recognized. It was mine. Lucas had given it to me on our wedding day. I had left it in the jewelry box in the master bedroom. I stopped. The room seemed to tilt. Beatrice, I said, stepping into her circle. She turned, annoyed. What is it, Elena? The guests are waiting. That necklace, I pointed. It's mine. The conversation around us died. 3 women in expensive gowns looked from me to Beatrice. Beatrice didn't flinch. She touched the diamonds at her throat with a manicured hand. This? Oh, don't be silly, dear. This is a family heirloom. I'm just keeping it safe. You're so distraught lately. You lose everything. Remember the car keys? She smiled at the guests. Poor thing. Grief does terrible things to the memory. The guests nodded sympathetically. At her, not at me. I didn't lose the keys, I said, my voice shaking. You took them. Eleanor, Gavin appeared at my elbow. He gripped my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. You're making a scene. You're drunk. I haven't had a drop to drink. Come on, he said, pulling me away. Let's get you some water. You're embarrassing yourself. He dragged me towards the kitchen. The guests whispered. I heard the words unstable and breakdown. Gavin shoved me through the swinging doors into the pantry. The noise of the party faded slightly. Listen to me, he hissed, leaning into my face. You keep your mouth shut about the jewelry. You keep your mouth shut about everything. Or I swear to God, I will make the next 40 days hell. You already are, I spat back. He laughed. You have no idea. This is the nice version. Now stay in here. He turned and walked out, letting the door swing shut. I was alone in the pantry, surrounded by shelves of caviar and expensive wine that Lucas would have hated. I felt trapped. I felt small. But then I felt something else. A weight in my pocket. The USB drive. I had carried it with me all day, afraid to leave it in my room. The house is watching. I needed to see what the house saw. I waited 5 minutes, then slipped out the back door of the kitchen. I ran through the rain toward the detached garage. Above the garage was Lucas's server room. It was the nerve center of the estate. Beatrice and Richard didn't know it existed. To them, it was just storage. I climbed the narrow stairs, my wet dress clinging to my legs. I punched in the code on the keypad. 0412. The lock beeped green. The room was cool and hummed with the sound of fans. Rows of black servers blinked in the darkness with blue LED lights. It felt like being inside a giant brain. I sat down at the main terminal. I plugged in the USB drive. A window popped up on the screen. It wasn't a standard file explorer. It was a custom interface. Welcome, Elena. Access level omniscient. My breath caught in my throat. He had coded it for me. I clicked on a folder named The Eyes. Suddenly, the screen split into a grid of 20 squares. Each square was a live feed from a different room in the house. I saw the living room. I saw Richard laughing with the investors. I saw the kitchen. I saw the caterers stealing bottles of wine. I saw the hallway. I saw Gavin pickpocketing a guest's coat. The cameras were everywhere. Hidden in the smoke detectors, the bookshelves, the molding, high definition, audio enabled. I put on the headphones. The sound was crystal clear. It was like I was standing right next to them. I clicked on the feed for the Blue Lounge, a small sitting room off the main hall. Richard had just walked in there with a man I didn't recognize. A man with a stethoscope around his neck. I turned up the volume. "Can't wait 45 days, doctor," Richard was saying. He was pacing. "The stock is volatile. If news gets out that Lucas left the company in limbo, the shares will tank. We need control of the assets now." "But the will is specific," the doctor said. His voice was oily. Unless the primary beneficiary is incapacitated," Richard finished. He stopped pacing. "Elena is fragile, doctor. You saw her tonight. Accusing my wife of theft, attacking my son. She's delusional, paranoid." My blood ran cold. "If you could evaluate her," Richard continued, lowering his voice, "sign a paper stating she is a danger to herself. We could have her committed to a private facility. For her own good, of course. That would nullify the residency clause." The doctor tapped his chin. "Involuntary commitment is tricky, Richard. I'd need proof of an episode, something violent." "Oh, don't worry," Richard smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Gavin is working on that. We'll have an episode for you. Maybe even tonight." I ripped the headphones off. I stared at the screen, trembling. They weren't just greedy. They were dangerous. They were planning to lock me away, to drug me, to erase me completely, so they could sell Lucas's life's work for parts. I looked at the server rack. The blue lights blinked steadily, recording everything. They were recording the conspiracy. They were recording the trap. But a recording wouldn't save me if I was locked in a padded room tomorrow morning. I needed to survive tonight. I looked back at the screen. The feed from the kitchen showed Gavin. He was holding something, a small vial. He was pouring it into a glass of punch. "Here you go, Elena," he muttered to himself, unaware he was being watched. "Nighty-night." He put the glass on a tray and started walking towards the door, towards the party, towards where he thought I was. I stood up. My fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the operator. I typed a command into the terminal. Download. Last 30 minutes. Destination. Secure cloud. The progress bar moved. 10%. 20%. I had to get back to the house. I had to play my part. If they knew I knew, they would become desperate. And desperate men do terrible things. I pulled the USB drive out. I wasn't just fighting for the inheritance now. I was fighting for my life. I ran down the stairs back into the rain. I entered the kitchen just as Gavin walked back in, looking around for me. "There you are," he said, his smile bright and fake. He held out the glass of punch. "Mom feels bad about the argument. She wanted you to have this, a peace offering." I looked at the glass. The liquid was dark red. It swirled innocently. I looked at Gavin's face. Behind the smile there was anticipation. He was waiting for me to drink the poison. I reached out and took the glass. "Thank you, Gavin," I said. "That is very thoughtful." I raised the glass towards my lips. Gavin's eyes widened. He stopped breathing. I paused. "Actually," I said, "I should toast with your parents. It's only right." I walked past him, carrying the evidence in my hand, heading straight into the lion's den. The glass felt heavy in my hand, like I was holding a grenade with the pin pulled out. I walked across the living room floor. The heels of my shoes clicked against the wood, a metronome counting down the seconds. The room was a blur of expensive suits and forced laughter. I didn't look at the guests. I looked at Richard and Beatrice. They were standing by the fireplace, posing for photos. The perfect grieving parents. Gavin was watching me from the kitchen doorway. I could feel his gaze burning into the back of my neck. He was waiting for me to take a sip. He was waiting for his peace offering to turn me into the hysterical woman they needed me to be. I stopped 3 feet away from Richard.
"Elena," Richard said, his smile tight. "You decided to join us."
"I wanted to make a toast," I said. My voice was loud enough to carry over the low hum of jazz music. Heads turned. The room went quiet. I raised the glass. The dark red liquid caught the light of the chandelier. "To Lucas," I said, my hand trembling just enough to be noticeable. "And to the truth." Beatrice's eyes narrowed. She sensed something was wrong. "That's lovely, dear. Now drink up. You look pale." "I do feel dizzy," I said. I swayed slightly on my feet. It wasn't entirely acting. The adrenaline was making my knees weak. "I think," I gasped, bringing the glass closer to my lips, then letting my hand spasm. I dropped it. The glass hit the stone hearth of the fireplace. It didn't just break, it exploded. The red punch splattered across the white orchids. It splashed onto Beatrice's cream-colored shoes. Shards of crystal skittered across the floor. "Oh my God!" Beatrice shrieked, jumping back. "You clumsy idiot! My shoes!" "I'm sorry," I stammered, gripping the mantelpiece for support. "I feel the room is spinning." "She's drunk," Gavin shouted, marching into the circle. "I told you, Mom. She's been drinking all afternoon." The guests whispered. I saw the judgment in their eyes. The widow is a mess. The widow is unstable. "I haven't been drinking," I said, letting tears well up in my eyes. I miss him so much." I sank to my knees, burying my face in my hands. It was the performance of a lifetime. I had to play the victim to survive the predators. "Get her up," Richard snapped to Gavin. "Get her out of here. Take her to the library. Dr. Aris is there." Gavin grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "Come on, you embarrassment." He hauled me up. As he dragged me away, I looked back at the shattered glass. A waiter was already mopping up the red puddle. The evidence was being erased. But I had survived the night. The library was dim. The air was thick with cigar smoke. Dr. Aris was sitting in Lucas's chair. He was a small man with wet lips and eyes that looked like beads of black glass. He didn't stand up when Gavin threw me onto the leather sofa. "Leave us, Gavin," Dr. Aris said softly. Gavin sneered at me. Don't try anything, Elena. The doors are locked from the outside. He left. The heavy oak door clicked shut. So, Dr. Aris said, leaning forward. He took a pen light from his pocket. Richard tells me you are having hallucinations? Fits of rage. Richard lies, I said, straightening my dress. I dropped the act. My voice was cold. Dr. Aris paused. He shone the light in my eyes. I didn't blink. Dilated pupils, he muttered. Elevated heart rate, signs of mania. I just narrowly avoided being drugged by my brother-in-law, I said. My heart rate is elevated because I'm terrified, not because I'm crazy. Dr. Aris chuckled. It was a dry, scratching sound. Paranoia, persecution complex, classic symptoms. He pulled a notepad from his pocket and began to scribble. You know, Mrs. Thorne, grief triggers latent psychosis in many women. It's nothing to be ashamed of. A nice long rest in a secure facility would do you wonders. How much is he paying you? I asked. Dr. Aris stopped writing. He looked at me over his spectacles. Excuse me? Richard, I said. How much is he paying you to sign that paper? 10,000? 20? Lucas's estate is worth 50 million. Don't sell your soul for pennies, doctor. His face hardened. The professional mask slipped. You are very sick, Elena. And sick people don't get to manage $50 million estates. They get managed. He stood up and walked to the door. He knocked twice. I have seen enough, he told someone on the other side. I will prepare the papers for the involuntary hold. We can execute it in the morning. He looked back at me one last time. Sleep well, Mrs. Thorne. The door opened and closed. I rushed to it. I tried the handle. Locked. I was a prisoner in my own library. I paced the room. My phone. I reached into my pocket. It was gone. Gavin must have taken it when he grabbed me. I checked the windows. They were floor-to-ceiling glass, looking out onto the garden. But they were storm-proof. Heavy latches. Locked. I was cut off. No phone, no internet, no way to call Mr. Sterling. I looked at Lucas's desk. The computer was gone. Richard must have moved it. Panic began to claw at my throat. If they came back in the morning with those papers, men in white coats would drag me away. I would be sedated. By the time I woke up, the 45 days would be over. They would have the money. I needed a weapon. Or an exit. I went back to the loose floorboard. I prayed the recorder was still there. I pried it open. Empty. My heart stopped. I frantically felt around inside the hollow space. My fingers brushed against paper. A note. I pulled it out. It was a piece of hotel stationery. On it, in scrawled handwriting, was a message. Nice try, Alina. G. Gavin. He had found it. He must have searched the room after our argument yesterday. I sank onto the floor. They had my phone, they had the recorder, they had the doctor. They had won. I pulled my knees to my chest. The darkness of the library felt suffocating. The smell of Richard's cigars was everywhere, choking out the scent of Lucas's old books. Think, Elena, think. Lucas was a genius. He didn't just have Plan A and Plan B, he had protocols. I looked up at the ceiling. The smoke detector blinked. The eyes. I had the USB drive in my bra. I had managed to hide that before the party. But without a computer, it was useless. Or was it? Lucas had designed the smart home system. Project Oracle, he called it. He used to brag that the house could run itself. The interface is everywhere, El, he had told me once, showing me a hidden panel behind a painting. If the servers go down, Use the manual overrides. I scanned the room. The walls were lined with bookshelves, but there was one section that was different. A false panel where Lucas kept the circuit breakers for the east wing. I ran to the shelf. I pulled on the copy of Dante's Inferno. The panel clicked and swung open. Behind it, there wasn't just a fuse box. There was a small, touchscreen maintenance tablet mounted into the wall. It was dormant, the screen black. I touched it. Nothing. I pressed and held the power button. A faint battery icon appeared. Red. 1%. Come on, I whispered. Please. The screen flickered. The logo of Lucas's company appeared. Then a password prompt. I typed 0412. Access denied. My stomach dropped. They must have changed the main codes. Richard would have IT guys working on this. I tried Lucas's birthday. Access denied. I tried the name of our dog. Access denied. System lockout in one attempt. I closed my eyes. I tried to think like Lucas. If he knew his family would take over, what password would he use? What was the one thing they would never guess? The one thing they didn't know about him? I remembered the recording. They don't know what family means. I remembered the last thing he whispered to me in the hospital. You are my horizon. I typed, horizon. The screen turned green. Welcome admin. System status, compromised. Warning, unauthorized user detected. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I quickly navigated the menu. I couldn't call out. The external line was cut. But I could control the internal environment. I checked the logs. Dr. Aris was currently in the guest suite. Richard and Beatrice were in the master bedroom. Gavin was in the kitchen. I clicked on the kitchen feed. The tiny screen showed Gavin going through my purse. He pulled out my phone. He smashed it on the counter, then threw the pieces into the trash compactor. That's for the hand, you witch, he muttered. I felt a cold rage settle over me. I looked at the options on the tablet. Lighting, temperature, locks, audio. I couldn't escape yet. If I unlocked the door, the alarm would sound. But I could make their night miserable. I could start the psychological warfare. I selected the master bedroom. Temperature setting, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I slid the bar down. New setting, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Then I went to the audio menu. Lucas had installed speakers in every room for music. I selected the master bedroom playlist. I chose a file from the sound effects library Lucas used for his game design. File, Subtle Whispers Loop.mp3. Volume, 10%, subliminal. I hit execute. Next I went to the guest suite where Dr. Aris was sleeping. Lighting, strobe mode, random interval. Interval, every 45 minutes. I hit execute. Finally the kitchen. Gavin. I saw him eating a leftover steak. I looked at the locks menu. The kitchen had a pantry with an electronic lock. I waited. Gavin stood up. He walked toward the pantry, probably looking for more wine. He stepped inside. I slammed my finger on the lock button. On the screen, I saw the pantry door slide shut. Gavin spun around. He pounded on the door. He was trapped with the wine and the rats. I smiled. It was a grim, tight smile. The battery on the tablet flashed. 0%. The screen went black. I was in the dark again. But now I knew I had teeth. I curled up on the leather sofa, wrapping Lucas's old coat around me. It still smelled like him. Tomorrow, they would try to commit me. Tomorrow, I had to find a way to get the evidence to Sterling. But tonight, the house was fighting back. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain. Somewhere upstairs, the heating vents groaned as the temperature plummeted. Somewhere in the kitchen, Gavin was screaming into the void. The war had moved to the trenches. The library door unlocked with a heavy metallic click. I didn't move from the leather sofa. I had been awake for hours, watching the dust motes dance in the sliver of morning light that cut through the heavy curtains. I was stiff, hungry, and terrified, but I forced my face into a mask of blank confusion. The door swung open. It wasn't the orderly entrance of the day before. It was an invasion of chaos. Gavin stormed in first. He looked like a wild animal. His shirt was stained with red wine. His hair was matted, and his eyes were bloodshot and frantic. He smelled of sour sweat and fear. "You!" he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You did this!" Behind him, Richard and Beatrice shuffled in. They looked like ghosts of their former selves. Beatrice was wrapped in a thick fur coat, shivering violently. Her skin was grey, her lips pale. Richard was rubbing his temples, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting a shadow to jump out at him. "Good morning," I said softly, pulling Lucas's coat tighter around me. "Did everyone sleep well?" "Shut up!" Gavin lunged at me, but Richard caught his arm. "Enough, Gavin," Richard croaked. His voice was hoarse. "We don't know it was her." "Who else could it be?" Gavin shouted, spinning on his father. "The pantry door locked itself, Dad. I was trapped in there for 6 hours. 6 hours with the rats. The keypad was dead. It wouldn't accept the code." "And the heating," Beatrice chattered, her teeth clicking together. "It was freezing in our room. I could see my breath. And the noises." She looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. "The whispers, Elena. Did you hear them?" I tilted my head. "Whispers? No, Beatrice. It was very quiet in here. Peaceful even. Lucas always loved this room." "Stop saying his name," she snapped. "It felt like he was in the walls." Dr. Eris entered last. He looked the worst of all. His skin was pasty, and he was clutching his briefcase to his chest. He kept blinking rapidly, as if bright lights were still flashing behind his eyelids. "I cannot work in these conditions," Dr. Eris muttered. "The lights. On and off, like a strobe. I have a migraine." "It's just a glitch," Richard insisted, though he didn't sound convinced. "The storm must have scrambled the system. I'll call the technicians." "The technicians can't come," Gavin laughed hysterically. "I checked the gate. It's jammed shut. The electronic lock is fried. We're stuck here." I felt a surge of triumph in my chest. "Good," I thought. "The house is holding you hostage." "We need to focus," Richard said, trying to regain his authority. He straightened his tie, though it was crooked. "Dr. Aris, do the evaluation now. I want this woman committed by noon so we can override the security protocols and get out of here." Dr. Aris nodded weakly. He pulled a chair over, sitting a safe distance away from me. "Mrs. Thorne," he began, clicking his pen, "let's talk about your episodes." I looked at him calmly. "I'm not the one hearing whispers, Doctor. I'm not the one seeing flashing lights. Perhaps you should evaluate yourself." "Don't play games with me," he hissed. "You smashed a glass yesterday. You attacked your brother-in-law. You are exhibiting signs of violent hysteria." "I dropped a glass because I was dizzy," I said. "And Gavin attacked me. Look at him." I pointed at Gavin, who was pacing the room, chewing on his fingernails. "Does that look like a stable man to you?" Dr. Aris glanced at Gavin. Gavin was muttering to himself, checking his phone repeatedly. "My phone is dead," Gavin whispered. "No signal. Why is there no signal?" The storm, Richard said dismissively. Focus, Gavin. You don't understand, Gavin yelled. I need to make a call. Today is the 15th. I need to make the payment. The room went silent. Richard looked at his son. Payment? What payment? Gavin froze. He realized he had said too much. Nothing, just bills. My car. Richard narrowed his eyes. You sold the car last month, Gavin. Who do you owe money to? Gavin didn't answer. He looked at me. His eyes were desperate, feral. He needed a scapegoat. He needed cash. And he needed it now. She has it, Gavin blurted out. Has what? Beatrice asked. The ring, Gavin said, a cruel smile forming on his lips. Grandmother's emerald ring. Lucas gave it to her. It's worth at least 50 grand. Beatrice gasped. She turned to me, her eyes predatory. That ring belongs to the family, Elena. It was my mother's. Lucas had no right to give it to you. He had every right, I said, instinctively covering my left hand. It was his property. He gave it to me when we got engaged. It's mine. Not anymore, Richard said. If you are declared mentally incompetent, your assets are frozen and managed by your guardians. That would be us. Give it to me, Gavin demanded, stepping closer. No, I stood up, backing away until my legs hit the desk. This isn't about the will. This is robbery. It's asset protection, Richard barked. Gavin, get the ring. Gavin didn't need to be told twice. He lunged at me. I tried to dodge, but the heavy desk trapped me. Gavin grabbed my wrist. His grip was wet and slippery, but strong. He twisted my arm behind my back. Let go, I screamed. Screw the safe, Gavin shouted. I need cash, Dad. They're going to break my legs. Who? Richard demanded. The sharks, Gavin screamed. I owe 100 grand. I told them I'd have it when Lucas died. They know he's dead. They are calling me. The truth hung in the air like a foul smell. Gavin had bet on his brother's death. He had borrowed money against Lucas's life. Beatrice put a hand to her mouth. Oh, Gavin. Don't look at me like that, Gavin spat. You guys did the same thing. You're just waiting for the 45 days. I just advanced the timeline. He looked at me, huddled on the floor. And she's in the way. Dr. Aris, sign the damn paper. Dr. Aris looked at the violence that had just occurred. He looked at the ring in Gavin's pocket. He looked at Richard's turned back. I need to draft the document properly, Dr. Aris stammered. I need my laptop. It's in the guest room. Go, Richard commanded. Do it. Dr. Aris hurried out of the room. Gavin looked down at me. See, Elena? You can't win. We take what we want. I looked up at him. My finger was bleeding. My heart was pounding. But my mind was clear. You didn't take it, I said, my voice low. You stole it. And the house saw you do it. Gavin laughed. The house? The house is a pile of bricks, you crazy bitch. And the cameras? I cut the hard line to the server room this morning. Nothing is recording. My heart sank. He cut the line. That meant the evidence of this assault wasn't on the cloud. It wasn't saved. I was alone. Truly alone. Take her to her room, Richard ordered. Lock her in. We wait for the doctor to finish the paperwork. Then we call the authorities to transport her. Gavin grabbed me by the arm again. He dragged me out of the library, through the cold hallway, and up the stairs. He threw me into the master bedroom. Enjoy the view, he sneered. It's the last time you'll see it. He slammed the door. I heard the key turn in the lock. I sat on the edge of the bed. The room was freezing. The smart home prank I had played was still in effect. The thermostat was set to 55 degrees. I shivered, but not from the cold. I had failed. The ring was gone. The evidence was gone. In an hour, they would come with a straitjacket. I looked around the room. It was the room where Lucas and I had shared our dreams. Now, it was a prison cell. My eyes landed on the bedside table. Lucas's favorite book was there, The Count of Monte Cristo. I picked it up. I opened it, just to feel the paper, to feel close to him. A piece of paper fluttered out. It wasn't a bookmark. It was a receipt. I picked it up. It was a receipt for a storage unit in the city, rented 3 days before he died. Why would Lucas rent a storage unit? I turned the receipt over. In Lucas's shaky handwriting, it said, Protocol Omega. Key is in the night. The night? I looked around the room. There was a chess set on the table by the window. Lucas taught me to play. He always played black. I played white. I walked over to the chessboard. The pieces were set up in mid-game, a game we never finished. I looked at the black knight. I picked it up. It felt light, too light. I twisted the base. It unscrewed. Inside the hollow piece there was a small silver key, the key to the storage unit. And wrapped around the key was a tiny micro SD card. I stared at it. Gavin said he cut the hard line to the server room. That meant the cameras weren't sending data to the cloud anymore. But Lucas was paranoid. Lucas was brilliant. What if the cameras had a local backup? What if Protocol Omega was the failsafe? I didn't have a computer to check the card. I didn't have a phone. But I had the key. And I had a window. I looked out. We were on the second floor. Below the window was the conservatory roof. It was a steep drop, slippery with rain. If I fell, I would break a leg, or worse. But if I stayed, I would lose my mind. I pocketed the key and the card. I tied my hair back. I walked to the window. I unlatched it. The wind howled, blowing freezing rain into my face. You are my horizon, I whispered to the wind. I climbed onto the sill. The jump was terrifying. I landed on the glass roof of the conservatory. My feet slipped on the wet moss. I slammed onto my side, sliding down toward the edge. I clawed at the metal frame. My fingernails broke. I gasped in pain, but I didn't scream. Screaming would alert the monsters. I caught the gutter at the last second. I hung there, dangling 20 feet above the muddy garden. My arms burned. My injured hand throbbed. Drop, I told myself. Just drop and roll. I let go. I hit the mud hard. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I rolled, covering my head, stopping in a rose bush. Pawns tore at my dress and my skin. I lay there for a moment, gasping for air, the rain mixing with the mud on my face. I was alive. I scrambled up. I was limping. My ankle was twisted but not broken. I couldn't go to the gate. Gavin said it was jammed, and they would see me on the driveway. I had to go through the woods. The estate was surrounded by forest. Beyond the forest was the old service road. It was a 5-mile hike to the nearest gas station. I started to run. Every step was agony. The mud sucked at my shoes. The branches whipped my face. But I ran. I ran for Lucas. I ran for the ring. I ran for the truth. As I reached the tree line, I heard a shout from the house. She's gone! The window is open! Gavin's voice. Then the sound of a dog barking. My blood froze. They didn't have a dog. Gavin had chased our dog away. But Richard had mentioned calling security earlier. Private security. Men with dogs. Find her! Richard's voice echoed across the lawn. Bring her back! I plunged into the woods. I didn't look back. Scene change. The gas station. 2 hours later, I collapsed through the door of the rusty pump gas station. I looked like a creature from a horror movie. Mud-covered, bleeding, soaking wet, shivering violently. The clerk, a teenager with headphones around his neck, dropped his magazine. Whoa, lady, are you okay? Should I call the cops? No, I gasped, leaning against the counter. No cops. They are on the payroll. I didn't know if that was true, but I couldn't risk it. Richard had friends everywhere. I need a taxi, I said, and a computer. Do you have a computer? There's an old PC in the back for inventory, the kid said. But I pulled off my silver locket, the one with the picture of me and Lucas. It was the only valuable thing I had left. Take this, I said. It's silver. Please, just let me use the computer and the phone. The kid looked at the locket, then at my desperate eyes. He pushed the locket back to me. Keep it, he said. Come on back. I limped behind the counter. I sat at the dusty computer. I plugged in the micro SD card into a card reader dongle the kid found in a drawer. The screen flickered. A folder opened. Protocol Omega, offline backup. It contained audio files, not video, just audio. But it was continuous. It had recorded everything. It had recorded Gavin admitting to the death. It had recorded Richard ordering the doctor to fake the evaluation. It had recorded the assault in the library. I let out a sob of relief. I had the smoking gun. But I wasn't safe yet. I picked up the landline phone. I dialed the number I had memorized from Lucas's will. Sterling Law Firm, a receptionist answered. I need to speak to Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice shaking. This is Elena Thorne. It's an emergency. Code red. There was a pause. Mr. Sterling is in court, Mrs. Thorne. Can I take a message? Tell him... I looked out the window. A black SUV was slowly cruising past the gas station. It slowed down. Gavin was in the passenger seat. They were hunting me. Tell him I'm going to the storage unit, I whispered. Tell him to meet me at Unit 412 at the Bayside Storage. Tell him to bring the police. Real police. I hung up. Kid, I said to the clerk, is there a back door? Yeah, he pointed. Through the storage room. If a guy with a scar on his eyebrow comes in here asking for a woman, I said, tell him I got on a bus to the airport. Got it, the kid said. He looked scared but determined. I grabbed the micro SD card. I ran out the back door, into the alleyway. I had to get to the city. I had to get to Unit 412. Whatever was in there was the final piece of the puzzle. And the wolves were right behind me. The alley behind the gas station smelled of diesel and rotting cardboard. I crouched behind a dumpster, pressing the micro SD card against my chest as if it were a second heart. The black SUV cruised past the mouth of the alley. I saw Gavin's silhouette in the passenger seat. He was scanning the street, his head turning like a predator's turret. They were gone. For now. I couldn't wait for a taxi. Taxis had records. Taxis had dispatchers who could be bribed. I needed to disappear into the veins of the city. A delivery truck rumbled to a halt at the red light nearby. It was a florist's van, the side painted with bright, cheerful daisies. Pete's Petals, we deliver smiles. I ran. I didn't think. I just sprinted through the rain and banged on the passenger door. The driver, a heavy-set man with a grey beard and a confused expression, rolled down the window. Lady, you okay? Please, I begged, water dripping from my nose. My husband, he's trying to kill me. I just need to get to the city. Please. The driver looked at my muddy dress, my bleeding hand, and the sheer terror in my eyes. He didn't ask questions. He unlocked the door. "Get in." I scrambled up into the high seat. As the truck lurched forward, I sank down low, hiding below the dashboard. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you."
"I ain't seen nothing," the driver grunted, keeping his eyes on the road. "Where to?"
"Bayside District," I said. "The storage yards." The ride took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of agonizing silence. Every siren I heard made me flinch. Every time the truck slowed down, I thought Richard had found us. But we made it. The driver dropped me off at the corner of the industrial park. The rain had turned into a mist, clinging to the rusty fences and the endless rows of orange metal doors.
"You sure you're okay here?" the driver asked.
"I will be," I lied. "Go, please." He drove off. I was alone in the grey wasteland. I found the entrance to Bayside Storage. It was an automated facility. No guards, just a keypad at the gate. I looked at the silver key I had found in the chess piece. It had a 4-digit code stamped on the head. 8844. I punched it into the keypad. Access granted. The gate rattled open. I walked down the long concrete corridors. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, buzzing like angry wasps. My footsteps echoed, announcing my presence to the empty air. Unit 400. Unit 410. Unit 412. It was at the end of a dead-end row. I stood before the orange door. My hand shook as I inserted the silver key into the padlock. It turned with a satisfying clunk. I slid the heavy bolt back and lifted the door. It rolled up with a screech of metal on metal that sounded like a scream. I stepped inside. I expected boxes. I expected furniture. I didn't expect a sanctuary. The unit had been transformed. The walls were lined with insulation and covered in white canvas. Rugs covered the cold concrete floor. In the center, there was an easel, and all around the room there were paintings. Dozens of them. I walked deeper inside, my breath catching in my throat. They were portraits. Portraits of me. Me sleeping, me laughing, me drinking coffee in the garden, me crying when my mother died. I touched a canvas. The paint was dry, but it felt warm. Lucas had painted these. He had spent his final months, when he was too weak to go to the office, coming here, painting me. Tears blurred my vision. He hadn't just left me money. He had left me this. Proof that I was seen. Proof that I was loved. But in the corner, there was a metal filing cabinet. I wiped my eyes and walked over to it. I pulled the top drawer open. It was full of red folders. I pulled one out. The label read, Richard, Embezzlement Evidence, 2018-2023. I pulled out another, Gavin, Gambling Debts and Loan Shark Connections. And another, Beatrice, Medical Interference. I opened the Beatrice folder. Inside were emails. Emails between Beatrice and Lucas's previous oncologist. She had tried to pressure the doctor to stop chemotherapy, claiming it was too expensive and futile, months before Lucas actually stopped treatment. My knees gave out. I sank onto the rug. They hadn't just been greedy. They had actively rooted for his death. They had tried to hasten it. And Lucas knew. He knew everything. He had compiled it all here. The true family clause wasn't just a test of character. It was a trap. If they failed to be decent, this evidence would be released. I saw a large envelope taped to the back of the file cabinet. It had my name on it. I tore it open. Inside was a letter, handwritten. My dearest Elle, If you are reading this, I am gone. And if you are here, it means they have broken your heart. I am so sorry. I couldn't put them in jail while I was alive. They are my parents. A part of me, the weak part, still loved them. But I knew that once I was gone, they would turn on you. This room is your shield. The files in this cabinet are enough to send Richard to prison for fraud and Gavin for racketeering. The micro SD card you found in the night contains the audio keys to decrypt the digital files on the USB drive. You have the power, Elle. You can destroy them, or you can save them. The choice is yours. That is your inheritance, not the money, but the power to choose your own justice. I love you. You are my masterpiece. Elle. I pressed the letter to my lips, sobbing. I had it. I had everything. I stood up, clutching the files in the micro SD card. I needed to get to Sterling. I needed to end this. I turned toward the open door, and I froze. 3 silhouettes stood in the doorway, blocked by the grey light of the rainy afternoon. Richard, Beatrice, Gavin. They were panting, wet. Their clothes were muddy. They looked like demons rising from the earth. Found you, Gavin grinned. His teeth were yellow, his eyes manic. I stepped back, clutching the files to my chest. Stay away. We tracked the truck, Richard said, stepping into the unit. He held a tire iron in his hand. A florist truck, Elena? Really? You always were predictable. Get out, I said, my voice trembling but loud. I have everything, Richard. I have the proof of the embezzlement. I have the emails about the chemotherapy. I have it all. Richard stopped. His face went pale. The chemotherapy. I know what you did, I spat at Beatrice. You tried to stop his treatment. You wanted him dead so you could get the payout sooner. Beatrice's face crumpled, not with guilt, but with fury. He was suffering. We were being pragmatic. You are monsters, I said.
Give me the files, Richard commanded, raising the tire iron. No. Grab her, Richard shouted. Gavin lunged. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. I threw the heavy file folder at Gavin's face. Papers flew everywhere like white confetti. He stumbled, blinded for a second. I tried to dodge past him, but Beatrice was faster than she looked. She grabbed my hair. You ungrateful little brat, she screamed, yanking my head back. I screamed in pain. Let go! Gavin recovered. He tackled me around the waist. We crashed into the easel. The painting of me, the one where I was laughing, fell and tore down the middle. I kicked and scratched. I bit Gavin's arm. He howled but didn't let go. Get the card, Richard yelled. Check her pockets. Gavin pinned my arms down with his knees. His weight was crushing my ribs. I couldn't breathe. Richard reached into my pocket. He pulled out the micro SD card. Is this it? He asked, holding it up like a trophy. Yes, Gavin panted, sweat dripping onto my face. That's the backup. Richard looked at the scattered files. He looked at the paintings. Burn it, Richard said cold. Burn it all. No, I screamed. Lucas painted these. They are all that's left of him. He's dead, Elena, Richard roared. And he's not coming back. And neither are you. Gavin got off me. He dragged me up by my arm. What do we do with her? Gavin asked. Richard looked around the storage unit. He looked at the heavy metal rolling door. Leave her, Richard said. Here? Beatrice asked. Someone will find her. Not for a while, Richard said. We'll lock it from the outside. We have the key. We'll take the files. We'll destroy the evidence. By the time anyone finds her, the 45 days will be over. We'll have the money. We'll be in the Cayman Islands. You can't do this, I pleaded. This is murder.
It's not murder, Richard said, picking up the stack of files. It's storage. You wanted to keep his memory alive? Fine, you can stay with it.
Gavin shoved me backward. I tripped over the torn canvas and fell hard onto the concrete. They stepped out of the unit.
Goodbye, Eleanor, Beatrice said.
She didn't even look sad. She looked annoyed that her hair was wet. Richard grabbed the chain of the door. No! Richard, please! I scrambled up, rushing toward the opening. The metal door came crashing down. Clang! Darkness. Absolute, total darkness. I threw myself against the metal. I pounded on it with my fists until they bled. Help! Help me! I heard the padlock click shut. I heard their footsteps walking away. I heard Gavin laughing.
We won, Dad. We actually won.
Then, silence.
The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the blood rushing in my ears. I slid down the cold metal door until I hit the floor. I was trapped in a steel box. No food, no water, no phone, no light. They had taken the evidence. They had taken the inheritance. They had taken my freedom. I crawled back to the center of the room. My hand brushed against the torn painting. I felt the rip in the canvas where my smiling face used to be. I curled into a ball on the rug. I failed you, Lucas, I whispered into the dark. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end. Time passes. I don't know how long I lay there. Hours? A day? The air was getting stale. My throat was parched. My body ached from the fall and the fight. I drifted in and out of consciousness. I dreamed of rain. I dreamed of Lucas holding an umbrella, but when I reached for him, he turned into smoke. I woke up to a sound, a buzzing. Not the buzzing of the fluorescent lights, those were off. It was a rhythmic vibration. Bzzzt, bzzzt, bzzzt. It was coming from the wall. I sat up, dizzy. I crawled toward the sound. It was coming from behind the filing cabinet. I pushed the heavy cabinet aside with the last of my strength. There, taped to the wall, hidden behind the metal, was a phone. An old burner flip phone, plugged into a portable battery pack. It was vibrating. Someone was calling. My heart hammered against my ribs. I snatched the phone off the wall. I flipped it open. The screen was bright in the darkness. Incoming call. Lawyer. Sterling? I pressed the green button. I put the phone to my ear. Hello? I rasped, my voice barely a croak. Mrs. Thorne? Sterling's voice was sharp, urgent. Are you there? Mr. Sterling, I sobbed. I'm here. They locked me in. Unit 412, Bayside Storage. Please, I can't breathe. Hold on, Eleanor, Sterling said. We know. We are outside. What? Lucas knew, Eleanor, Sterling said. He knew they would corner you. That phone you are holding? It has a GPS beacon. It activates only when the unit is sealed from the outside. It's the final failsafe. I heard a siren wail right outside the metal door. Then, the sound of a circular saw cutting through metal. Sparks showered into the room like golden rain. The door was ripped open. Light flooded in. Blinding, beautiful white light. Silhouettes rushed in. Not Richard, not Gavin. Police officers, paramedics, and Mr. Sterling. He walked over to me, stepping over the torn paintings. He knelt down and wrapped a warm blanket around my shoulders. It's over, Eleanor, he said gently. We have them. But
The evidence, I stammered, clinging to his sleeve. They took the files. They took the card.
Sterling smiled. It was a grim, satisfied smile. They took the decoys, Elena, he said. The real evidence was uploaded to my server the moment you punched the code into the gate keypad. Lucas didn't trust physical media. He trusted the cloud. He helped me stand up. Come, he said. There is something you need to see. He led me out of the dark unit, into the rain. Police cars were everywhere. Red and blue lights flashed against the gray sky. In the back of a squad car, I saw them. Richard, hands cuffed behind his back, screaming at an officer. Beatrice, weeping, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. Gavin, slamming his head against the window, looking at me with pure hatred. They saw me emerge from the tomb they had built for me. Alive, unbroken. I walked up to the squad car. Richard stopped screaming. He looked at me. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes. Only fear. I leaned down to the window. You failed the test, I whispered. I turned away. Take me home, I said to Sterling. I have a house to clean. The house was finally quiet. For 44 days, it had been filled with the noise of greed. The stomping of boots, the clinking of crystal glasses, the shouting of demands, the sinister whispering of conspiracies. Now, there was only the sound of the wind settling against the windows. I stood in the center of the living room. It was morning. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky the color of a bruised plum. Mr. Sterling stood beside me. He had driven me home from the police station after I gave my statement. He had stayed while the forensic team dusted the library for fingerprints. He was a sentinel in a grey suit. Are you sure you want to do this here, Elena? He asked gently. We can hold the final reading at my office. You don't have to let them back in. I looked at the fireplace where I had dropped the glass. The stain was gone, scrubbed away by the cleaning crew Sterling had hired overnight. But I could still see it in my mind. No, I said, my voice steady. Lucas wanted it to happen here. This house was the stage. It has to be the courtroom. They are out on bail, Sterling warned. Richard pulled every string he had. They are desperate, Elena. And desperate people are volatile. Let them come, I said. I'm not afraid of them anymore. The house knows the truth. And today, they are going to hear it too. I walked over to the window. I unlocked it. I opened it wide, letting the cool, clean air wash out the smell of stale cigar smoke and Beatrice's cloying perfume. It's day 45, I whispered. It's time. Noon. They arrived in a convoy of black sedans, not the sleek limousines of the funeral, but the aggressive armored cars of criminal defense attorneys. I sat at the head of the dining table. It was the first time I had sat there. Usually, Richard claimed that seat. Today, it was mine. Sterling sat to my right, his briefcase open, a tablet set up in front of him. The doors opened. Richard walked in first. He looked 10 years older than he had yesterday. His skin was grey, his eyes sunken. He wore a fresh suit, but it hung loosely on his frame. He walked with a limp, a reminder of the rough treatment by the police. Beatrice followed. She was wearing dark sunglasses indoors. Her lips were a thin white line. She didn't look at me. She looked at the floor, clutching her purse as if it contained the last scraps of her dignity. Gavin was last. He had a bandage over his eye where the file folder had cut him. He looked twitchy, erratic. He was vibrating with a mix of fear and drug withdrawal. 3 lawyers in sharp suits trailed behind them, carrying thick binders. Sit, Sterling said. It wasn't an invitation, it was an order. The lawyers pulled out chairs for their clients. Richard sat down heavily. He stared at me across the long mahogany table. You look pleased with yourself, Richard spat. His voice was gravel. Mr. Thorne, one of his lawyers interrupted, placing a hand on Richard's arm. Please, let me handle the talking. Remember the bail conditions. No direct contact. Richard shook the hand off. I am in my son's house. I will speak if I want to. This girl, this actress, she set us up. Entrapment. Assault, I corrected calmly. Kidnapping. Attempted murder. Alleged, the lawyer said quickly. All alleged, and entirely irrelevant to the proceedings of the will. My clients are the immediate family. The 45-day residency requirement was met. We are here to collect the assets so that we can handle these unfortunate legal misunderstandings. Sterling adjusted his glasses. He looked at the lawyer with the boredom of a predator watching a fly. The residency requirement was indeed met, Sterling said. You all lived here. You certainly made your presence felt. Then cut the check, Gavin snapped, drumming his fingers on the table. I have debts to settle. However, Sterling continued, ignoring him, you seem to have forgotten the second clause, the condition precedent. He reached into his briefcase. He pulled out the sealed white envelope. The red wax seal was still unbroken. The code of familial conduct. The room went silent. Richard stared at the envelope. Beatrice peeked out from behind her sunglasses. Lucas knew you, Sterling said softly. He knew you better than you knew yourselves. He knew that if he left the money unprotected, you would tear each other apart to get it. And he knew you would try to crush Elena. He was paranoid, Beatrice whispered. He was sick in the head. He was heartbroken, I said. Sterling picked up a letter opener. The sound of the metal slicing through the paper was sharp and final. He pulled out a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper. I will read the definition of true family as written by Lucas Thorne, Sterling announced. He cleared his throat. To my survivors, Sterling read. Lucas's words filled the room, making the air feel heavy. I defined family not by blood, but by behavior. A true family protects. A true family nurtures. He planned this, Richard whispered. My own son. He set a trap. He gave you a chance, I said. He gave you 45 days to be decent people, to just be kind. That's all you had to do. Just be kind to me. And you couldn't do it. Not even for $50 million. I looked at Gavin. You couldn't go one day without hurting someone. Gavin looked down at his hands. He was trembling. So, Sterling said, turning off the TV. The black screen reflected their terrified faces. Based on the evidence collected by the House and corroborated by Mrs. Thorne's testimony, I am issuing the final determination. He picked up a stamp. He pressed it onto the document. Disqualified. Richard Thorne, disqualified. Beatrice Thorne, disqualified. Gavin Thorne, disqualified. The rhythmic thud of the stamp was the only sound in the room. Wait! Beatrice cried out, taking off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red and puffy. Please, we have nothing. Richard leveraged the house. We have legal fees. If we don't get the money, we are destitute. We will be on the street. That is unfortunate, Sterling said, closing the folder. But it is not the estate's problem. Where does it go? Gavin asked, his voice cracking. The money. Who gets it? Her? He pointed a shaking finger at me. She gets it all, doesn't she? That was the plan. The gold digger gets the gold. I looked at Gavin. I felt a strange sense of pity. He still didn't understand. No, Gavin, I said.
I don't want his money. I never did. Then who? Richard demanded. Sterling flipped to the next page of the will. Clause 4b. In the event of disqualification of the primary beneficiaries, the entire liquid estate, $50 million, shall be transferred immediately to the Lucas Thorne Literacy Foundation and the Thorne Cancer Research Initiative. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. The money was gone. It wasn't going to me. It wasn't going to them. It was going to the world. It was going to help people who actually deserved it. Richard made a sound like a dying animal. He put his head on the table and wept. Not for his son, but for his loss. He burned it, Richard sobbed. He burned the money. He planted seeds, I corrected. However, Sterling said, there is one final asset. He looked at me. The real estate, Sterling said. The Skyline Villa and the intellectual property rights to Lucas's personal creations, including his software patents and his art collection. Sterling slid a thin document toward me. This is not part of the liquid estate, Sterling explained. This is the residuary estate. It goes to the surviving spouse, unconditionally. I looked at the document. I owned the house. I owned the Project Oracle software. I owned the paintings in the storage unit. And I owned the ground they were sitting on. I stood up. Get out, I said. Richard looked up, his face wet with tears. Elena, please. We have nowhere to go. The bail bondsman took the condo. Get out of my house, I repeated. My voice wasn't loud, but it was iron. You can't kick us out, Gavin said, standing up. We're family. I looked him dead in the eye. No, I said. You are not family. You are just people who share a last name. The true family is the one Lucas chose, and he chose me. I pointed to the door. Leave. Before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. Your bail conditions say you must not be near the victim. I am the victim, and I'm standing right here. Richard's lawyer stood up. He closed his binder. Come on, Richard. We need to go. If she calls the cops, your bail is revoked. Richard stood up shakily. He looked at the house one last time. He looked at the crystal chandelier, the marble floors, the life he had coveted so desperately. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the realization that he had underestimated me. He had underestimated love. You're just like him, Richard whispered. Stubborn, self-righteous. Thank you, I said. They shuffled out. Beatrice was sobbing loudly now. Gavin looked back at the kitchen, perhaps thinking about the food he wouldn't eat. The lawyers herded them out the front door like cattle. The heavy oak door slammed shut. The click of the latch was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. I sat back down in the chair. The room was empty again. Sterling watched me carefully. Are you all right, Elena? I don't know, I admitted. I feel light, like gravity just let go. That is the feeling of justice, Sterling said. It is rarely this clean, but when it is weightless. He packed up his tablet. There is one more thing. The USB drive you used to record the evidence, the one you found in the library. Yes? Lucas told me there is a final folder on it, Sterling said. He said you should watch it alone when it was all over. He handed me the USB drive. I will handle the transfer of funds to the charities, Sterling said. And I will start the eviction process for any of their remaining belongings. You won't have to see them again. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, I said, for everything. Don't thank me, he smiled, putting on his hat. I was just the messenger. Lucas was the architect. He walked to the door. He paused. He was very proud of you, Elena. He knew you would win. How could he know? I asked. I almost gave up 12 times. Because, Sterling said, opening the door to the bright afternoon sun, he knew you were the only one who loved him for him. And love is the only thing stronger than greed. He left. I was alone in the Skyline Villa. It was vast. It was empty. But it wasn't lonely. I looked at the USB drive in my hand. One last message. I stood up and walked toward the library. The sun was streaming through the windows now, turning the dust motes into gold. The rain had stopped completely. I had reclaimed the house. Now, I had to reclaim my life. The library was silent. The air was still thick with the memory of smoke and anger, but the ghosts were gone. I sat at Lucas's desk. I ran my hand over the cool, smooth wood. This was where he had built his empire. This was where he had designed the trap that saved me. I plugged the USB drive into the laptop I had retrieved from the server room. A single folder appeared on the screen. It was named simply For Elena. My finger hovered over the mouse. I was afraid. I had heard enough secrets for one lifetime. I didn't know if I could handle one more truth. But this was Lucas. And Lucas never did anything without a reason. I double-clicked the file. A video window opened. It was Lucas. He was sitting in this very chair. He was wearing his favorite grey hoodie, the one I was wearing right now. He looked thin, his skin pale from the treatment, but his eyes were bright, alive. "Hey, El," the video Lucas said. He smiled, and the lines around his eyes crinkled. I touched the screen, tracing the curve of his smile. "Hi," I whispered back. "If you're watching this," he continued, leaning back in the chair, "then the dust has settled. Sterling has done his job. The vultures have been chased away. And you are sitting in the big, empty house." He sighed, looking down at his hands. "I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that I burnt the money to spite them. And maybe a small part of me did. They hurt me, El. They made me feel like an ATM machine, not a son." He looked back at the camera, his gaze intense. "But that's not why I did it. I didn't give the 50 million to charity just to punish them. I did it to free you." I frowned. "Free me?" "If I had left you that money," Lucas said, "they would have hunted you forever. They would have sued you for decades. They would have made your life a misery of court dates and lawyers. The money was a target. I had to remove the target." Tears pricked my eyes. He was right. If I had the cash, Richard would never stop coming for me. By giving it away, he had made me worthless to them. "But," Lucas grinned, a mischievous sparkle returning to his eyes, "I didn't leave you with nothing. You know me better than that." He leaned closer to the camera. "The will says you get the intellectual property. Richard thinks that just means my old patents and some code. He thinks the value is in the liquid cash. He's old school. He doesn't understand software." Lucas held up a hard drive in the video. "This is Project Oracle, El. The smart home system? That was just the beta test. The code I wrote, the algorithm that runs the house, it's revolutionary. I've already had offers from tech giants in Silicon Valley. They want to license it." My breath caught in my throat. "The licensing deals are pending," he said. "They are in your name. Recurring revenue, royalties. It's not a lump sum of 50 million. It's a steady stream. Enough to keep you safe. Enough to let you paint for the rest of your life without ever selling a canvas if you don't want to." He paused.
His expression softened. I gave the past to the charities. I'm giving the future to you. He took a deep breath. You don't have to be a tech CEO. Sterling knows the people to hire. You just have to be the owner. You just have to be the visionary. You have the eyes, Elle. You see the world in ways I never could. The video was coming to an end. He looked at the camera for a long time, as if he was trying to memorize my face through time and space. Don't stay in the dark, Elena, he whispered. Paint the horizon. I love you. The screen went black. I sat there, the silence ringing in my ears. He hadn't just saved me. He had empowered me. He had turned the worthless artist into the owner of the future. He had outsmarted Richard not just legally, but technologically. I laughed. It was a wet, shaky sound, but it was real. You show off, I said to the black screen. You brilliant, wonderful show off. The Purge. The next morning, I woke up with a purpose. I didn't call the licensing companies. I didn't call the lawyers. I called a junk removal service. At 9 a.m., a truck arrived. 2 cheerful men in green uniforms hopped out. What are we taking, ma'am? One asked. Everything that doesn't belong, I said. I led them through the house. We started in the living room. That gold drape, I pointed. Gone. The ice sculpture trays, I said. Gone. We went to the guest rooms. I stripped the beds where Beatrice and Richard had slept. I threw the sheets into trash bags. I didn't want to wash them. I wanted them incinerated. I went to the kitchen. I opened the pantry, the one where Gavin had been trapped. It still smelled faintly of fear and sour wine. Clean it out, I ordered. Everything. Every bottle of wine, every can of caviar. I want it empty. The men worked quickly. They hauled box after box out to the truck. I went to the library. I looked at the heavy oak desk Richard had brought in, the one he used to plot my demise. This desk, I said. Take it. It looks expensive, ma'am, the mover noted. It is, I said. Chop it up for firewood. Finally, I went to the master bedroom. I stood in the doorway. This was the hardest room. This was where Gavin had locked me in. I walked to the window. I looked at the sill where I had jumped. The rain had washed away the mud on the roof below. I turned to the closet. My clothes were still there, pushed to the corner. Beatrice's fur coats took up the center space. She had left them behind in her haste to leave with the police. I pulled out the furs. They were heavy, smelling of mothballs and cruelty. I carried them downstairs myself. I walked out to the driveway where the junk truck was waiting. The pile of Thorne family artifacts was high. I threw the furs onto the top of the pile. Take it all away, I told the driver. Where to? The dump, I said. I don't care, just far away from here. The truck rumbled to life. I watched it drive down the winding driveway, carrying away the physical remnants of the last 45 days. I turned back to the house. It looked different. The windows were open. The curtains were billowing in the breeze. The heavy, oppressive atmosphere was gone. It was just a house again. My house. The studio. In the afternoon, I went to the storage unit. I had hired a private courier to bring everything back. The paintings Lucas had made, the files, the easel. I set up my studio in the sunroom again. The light was perfect. I picked up the canvas that had been torn during the fight with Gavin. It was the portrait of me laughing. The rip went right through my chest. I placed it on the easel. I could have thrown it away. It was damaged. It was a reminder of the violence. But Lucas had painted it. I mixed my paints. I found a shade of gold, Not the tacky gold of Beatrice's drapes, but the warm, glowing gold of the sun. I began to paint over the tear. I didn't try to hide it. I highlighted it. I turned the jagged rip into a seam of gold, like the Japanese art of kintsugi, repairing the broken with something precious. As I painted, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, Silicon Valley area code. I wiped my hands on a rag and answered. Hello, Elena Thorne? Speaking. Mrs. Thorne, this is David Chen from Apex Tech. We've been trying to reach the executor of the Thorne estate regarding the Oracle license. We heard the legal disputes have been settled. They have, I said, looking at the golden scar on the painting. We are very eager to proceed, David said. The technology your husband built, it's going to change how people live. We'd like to fly you out to San Francisco to discuss the partnership. I paused. San Francisco. A new city. A new world. I looked out the window at the garden. The roses were blooming. The ones Lucas planted. I'm not ready to travel yet, David, I said. I have some work to finish here. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like Elena. I looked at the empty corner of the studio where Lucas used to sit and watch me paint. Thank you, I whispered. I dipped my brush into the blue paint, the color of the sky after a storm. I turned to a fresh blank canvas. It was time to start something new. 6 months later, the seasons changed. The rain that had defined the worst month of my life eventually gave way to a hesitant spring, and then to a glorious, riotous summer. The Skyline Villa changed with it. I didn't live in a mausoleum anymore. I lived in a workshop. The grand hallway, once lined with portraits of stern ancestors I never knew, was now filled with my sketches. The smell of turpentine and espresso replaced the scent of old money and fear. I had become the thing Richard hated most, unpredictable. I was in the garden pruning the roses when Mr. Sterling's car pulled up. He visited once a month, usually to bring documents for the foundation or updates on the licensing deals. Today he looked different. He wasn't wearing his usual grey suit. He was wearing a lighter shade of blue. He looked less like an executioner and more like an uncle. Good morning, Elena, he called out, closing the car door. The garden looks magnificent. It's the fertilizer, I said, wiping dirt from my gloves. And the absence of toxic energy. He chuckled. We walked to the patio where I had set out a pitcher of iced tea. I have the final reports on the True Family Trust, Sterling said, setting his briefcase down. The charities? I asked. Yes. The Literacy Foundation has opened 3 new centers in the inner city. And the Cancer Research Initiative has just funded a breakthrough trial for the specific type of lymphoma that Lucas had. I felt a lump in my throat. He would have loved that. He would, Sterling agreed. But that's not what I meant. I have news about the other trust. I froze. What other trust? Sterling sighed. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thin grey folder. Lucas was a man of layers, Eleanor. You know this. He knew his parents better than anyone. He knew that if he left them with absolutely nothing, they would become desperate. They might hurt themselves, or worse, come back to hurt you. So? I asked, my heart beating faster. Did he leave them money? He left them a mercy stipend, Sterling said. A very small, modest living allowance, just enough to rent a 2-bedroom apartment and buy groceries. No country clubs, no designer clothes, just survival. I stared at him. He gave them money? After everything? Wait, Sterling held up a hand. There is a catch. Of course there is a catch. He slid the document toward me. The stipend is deposited monthly. But to access it, Richard and Beatrice must co-sign the withdrawal slip.
in person, at the bank. Okay. And, Sterling smiled, a glint of mischief in his eyes, the withdrawal is contingent upon them living together, in the same apartment. If they separate, the money stops. If they divorce, the money stops. If one of them moves out, the money stops. I gasped. Then I started to laugh. He trapped them together? He sentenced them to each other, Sterling corrected. They are forced to live in a small apartment with no servants, no audience, and only each other for company. They have to rely on the person they despise the most to survive. That's... I shook my head, awestruck. That's diabolical. It's poetic, Sterling said. And Gavin? What about him? The mercy stipend does not include him. The clause specifically states that Gavin must maintain gainful employment to receive a matching grant. For every dollar he earns legally, the estate gives him 50 cents. If he doesn't work, he gets nothing. So he has to work, I said. He is currently working at a car wash in Jersey, Sterling said. I hear he's actually decent at it. He was always good with cars. I looked out at the horizon. Lucas hadn't just punished them. He had tried to fix them. He forced his parents to learn partnership. He forced his brother to learn the value of $1. Even from the grave, he was trying to parent them. He was too good for us, I whispered. He was exactly what was needed, Sterling said. He stood up. Oh, and one more thing, the invitation. He handed me a sleek black envelope. The gallery opening tonight, the silent clause. Are you ready? I took the envelope. My name was printed on it in gold foil. Elena Thorne, artist. I'm ready, I said. The exhibition. The gallery was in the heart of the arts district. It was a space of concrete and glass, stark and modern. Tonight, it was full of people. But they weren't the sharks and vultures from Richard's parties. They were students, critics, friends, and strangers who had heard the story. The series was simple. 45 canvases, one for each day of the ordeal. The first few were dark, chaotic, swirls of gray rain and black umbrellas. Then the colors shifted. The jarring yellow of the gold sofa, the harsh red of the spilled punch. The middle paintings were claustrophobic, views from inside a pantry, views from behind a locked door. But as the series progressed, the light changed. There was the blue glow of the server room, the silver glint of a key hidden in a chess piece, the warm candlelight glow of the storage unit. And finally, the last painting. It was the largest one. Day 45. It depicted an open door, sunlight flooding into a dark room, and in the center of the light, a silhouette. Not me, but Lucas. He was fading, turning into light, his hand raised in a wave. I stood in the corner, watching people react. I saw a woman crying in front of the torn portrait, the one with the gold kintsugi seam. I saw a man staring intently at the blue server room, lost in the complexity of the digital patterns I had woven into the paint. It's extraordinary, a voice said beside me. I turned. It was a young woman. She was bald, wearing a colorful scarf around her head. She looked frail, but her smile was radiant. Thank you, I said. I'm not talking about the technique, she said, though that is beautiful. I'm talking about the story. I know who you are, Mrs. Thorne. I stiffened slightly. Please, call me Elena. Elena, she nodded. My name is Sarah. I'm one of the first recipients of the Thorne Cancer Research Trial. My breath caught. You are? Yes, she said. The treatment, it's experimental. But it's working. My counts are down. I have a future again. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was cool, but her grip was strong. I heard the story, she said. I heard that the money for my treatment came from a difficult choice, that you gave it up. I didn't give it up, I said, tears pricking my eyes. I planted it. Sarah squeezed my hand. Well, I just wanted you to know. The flower is blooming. Thank you. She walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there, paralyzed by the moment. This was the twist. The real twist. The money Richard wanted for yachts and status? It was walking around the room. It was in Sarah's smile. It was in the blood of people who were getting a second chance. I felt a presence beside me. I thought it was Sterling. But when I turned, no one was there. Just a gentle breeze from the open gallery door, smelling of rain and roses. I looked at the final painting, the silhouette of Lucas. You see this, don't you? I thought. You see her. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. It wasn't the warmth of victory. It was the warmth of peace. The grave. The next morning, I went to visit him. I hadn't gone since the funeral. I couldn't bear to see the fresh earth, the reminder of the mud. But now the grass had grown over it. It was green and soft. The headstone was simple. Lucas had designed it himself years ago. Lucas Thorne, architect, dreamer, husband. 1991 to 2023. The code compiles. The story continues. I placed a single white rose on the stone. Not a lily, a rose. I finished the series, I told him. And I met Sarah. She's going to live, Lucas. The wind rustled the trees in the cemetery. It sounded like a whisper. I sat down on the grass. I pulled out my sketchbook. I have a new idea, I said aloud. David from Silicon Valley called again. The Horizon software is launching next week. He wants a logo. I started to sketch. I didn't draw a computer. I didn't draw a cloud. I drew a house. A simple line drawing of a house with a strong foundation and a roof open to the sky. And inside the house, a heart. It was the symbol of the silent clause. The promise that a home isn't about walls. It's about what you protect inside them. I'm going to keep the house, I told the stone. But I'm opening the doors. I'm turning the East Wing into a residency for artists, struggling artists, like I was. I imagined it, the silent, empty rooms filled with music, with paint, with life. Gavin's old room becoming a sculpture studio. Beatrice's room becoming a library for writers. We're going to fill the silence, Lucas, I said. We're going to make so much noise, the ghosts won't stand a chance. I stayed there until the sun began to set. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. It was an alert from the security system, from the Horizon. Alert. Movement detected at main gate. Identification, Gavin Thorne. My stomach tightened. I opened the app. I pulled up the camera feed. Gavin was standing at the iron gates of the Skyline Villa. He was wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit. He looked tired, dirty. He wasn't trying to climb the fence. He wasn't screaming. He was holding a box. I watched him on the screen. He placed the box on the ground just outside the gate. He stood there for a moment, looking up at the house. He looked sad. Not angry, just sad. Then he turned and walked away, down the long road toward the bus stop. I drove to the gate.
I stopped the car and got out. The box was a cardboard shoebox. I opened it. Inside was the emerald ring, the one he had stolen, the one he had ripped from my finger, and a note, scrawled on a greasy napkin. I bought it back from the pawn shop. Took me 4 months of double shifts. I don't want the matching grant for this. Just tell Mom I'm sorry. I held the ring. It was cold and heavy. I looked down the road. Gavin was a small speck in the distance. He had passed the test. Late. Too late for the inheritance, but not too late for his soul. Lucas was right. People could change. It just took the right amount of pressure. I slipped the ring back onto my finger. It fit perfectly. I stood on the balcony of the Skyline Villa. It was night. The city lights twinkled below me like a sea of diamonds. The horizon system was humming quietly, adjusting the lights, securing the perimeter, watching over me like a guardian angel. I wasn't waiting for the 45 days to end anymore. I wasn't waiting for permission to live. I had the ring on my hand. I had the paint on my fingers. I had the truth in my heart. And somewhere, in a small apartment in the city, Richard and Beatrice were sharing a can of soup, learning the hard lesson of humility. Somewhere in Jersey, Gavin was scrubbing a car, learning the value of labor. And somewhere in a hospital, a girl named Sarah was dreaming of her future. The story wasn't a tragedy. It wasn't a revenge thriller. It was a love letter. A complicated, messy, painful, beautiful love letter. I hear you, I whispered to the wind. I see you. I turned off the balcony light. The house went dark, but the stars above burned brighter than ever.